at 11:01. Hey. Live on YouTube, people are coming in. We have Ken, we have Judy Walcott, Victor Wallace. So let's start. Good morning.
Good morning.
Community Church of Boston this morning lights a candle to the memory of Diego Mendoza Lacan. He was also known to us as Manuel. He lived in sanctuary in Community Church's third floor for about 2 years during the 80s while he was fleeing repression in Guatemala and waiting for status in Canada. And he was a very popular speaker. He traveled around with Bill Alberts and made a bunch of talks. We have in our archive a talk that he gave one day with Rigoberta Menchú, his fellow country person from Guatemala, who later won the Nobel Prize. Manuel was here and then moved to Canada, where he lived his whole life in Ottawa and retired. We reconnected with him pretty recently, maybe only a year ago, through just mutual friends and finding out who he was. He was a wonderful artist. We have some of his pieces of art here in the church. So we light this candle to his memory. Manuel, también conocido como Diego Mendoza Lacan, presente. We start with some words from Clarence Skinner, who founded this church in 1920, exactly 100 years ago. Out of the world's wide ways we come to this, our house of fellowship and aspiration. Here may the evils which beset us be banished by the power of justice, the fears that haunt us be overcome by fresh insight, the doubts that drive us be dissolved into finer faith. Here, each in our own way, yet together, let us for a brief time look into the mysteries of life's beginning, the source out of which the endless eons roll and countless lives emerge, and with renewed hope, search through this maddening maze of things to find again life's aims and meaning, and above all, its glory. Clarence Skinner, I just had a thought during that reading that I'd like to set that to music. That's a challenge that we will take on sometime. Because we have some spectacular music this morning. We're just so glad to welcome Terry and Greg, also known as Magpie, to our humble Zoom session here. Terry and Greg have this half a century full of activist music under their belt, countless recordings and countless struggles they've been part of. It's just song after song of inspiration to all of us other musicians. It's just an honor to have them with us this morning. Will you all virtually or like hearing impaired people welcome Greg and Terry Magpie to join us this morning at Community Church.
Thank you, Dean.
Thanks, Dean.
It comes right back at you. You are one of the most incredible people we know.
Yeah. And thank you all for being here. stand before the morning sun, the dark night close behind. Another day to live the hope, no longer running blind. I've seen the storm clouds coming, I've felt the cold hard rain, but when loving friends stand by me, I can rise up once again, I can rise up once again. I stand before the morning sun, the land bathed in new light, sparkling rivers and high mountains. On birds' wings my heart takes flight. I'll lend a hand to all I can, try to leave this world a better place. See all as my relations beyond the human race, beyond the human race. I stand before the morning sun, in the land of promise born, lies of stolen power I do behold with scorn. I bow to no master, defy false piety. My faith is in the living earth that each day gives birth to me, each day gives birth to me. Morning sun, with others hand in hand. Our journey now has just begun. At the crossroads now we stand, turning away from fool's treasure, each one to do our part. We find the wealth that matters is in each other's heart. It's in each other's heart.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry and Greg. It's beautiful. And there's a whole nother set of lyrics to that melody. Am I right?
We originally made up that melody when we were setting words that had been written by Woody Guthrie to music.
Yes.
And it was called
This Morning.
I Am Born Again.
Yeah.
And his, Woody was a person who, when they asked for, what religion you belonged to on his, any form that he had to fill out, he always wrote in the word all. And so this morning, he was very much into the idea that sort of came out of the sort of evangelical Christian movement of being born again. But to him, being born again meant something entirely different. And there were actually two sets of those lyrics that he wrote. One was really more spiritually oriented, and then the second one was really focused on unions and being a union member. And
then after writing that music, we decided we should write our own
we-
words.
yeah, we-
So
yeah.
we were inspired by Woody, and we decided to
we
write our
sort
own.
of picked up where he left off, took it to the next level.
That's great. I particularly connect with This Morning I Am Born Again, just because I have a kind of evangelical childhood missionary background, and that's just a whole new definition to it. And it's a very positive, beautiful
Yeah.
writing from Woody Guthrie. And so we have sung that poem with your melody here at Community Church. So
Lovely.
and the whole thing about religion all is right up our alley too. We
Right.
have this history, non-sectarian, and back in the day, this church was before there was like mixed marriages between religions, and that was like this big scandalous thing. This church welcomed people, and the minister would marry a Jew and a Catholic. Imagine that scandal! Thank you for that song as well as the new lyrics. Beautiful, Magpie. Thank you so much. Some quick announcements. Last Sunday after church, several of us went up to the home of Tommy Rosa. Tommy Rosa spent 28 years in prison, and he was one of our members behind bars, and he is free. His case was taken up by the Innocence Project, and he has always maintained his innocence. 28 years later, he is free. He's with his wife and children and grandchildren, and it was a welcome ceremony drive-by party that we had for him. We decorated all of our cars. It was really a lovely thing. You can read about Tommy if you Google his name into the Boston Globe or search. There's an article about him. There also happens to be another article about a similar story, actually similar in that they got released, but totally different story for Arnie King. And I hope you will all join us. He's speaking on this in 2 weeks on this same platform. He's coming in person to be here with us at church. And Arnie's case is completely different. He always admitted that he did what he did. 49 years he was in prison, and he became this amazing model citizen. We have championed his freedom for 20 years, past a whole series of governors. He is free, and he just got a favorable decision from a judge for a new trial based on just the racism of 50 years ago. No black people allowed on the jury, and he's just an inspiring guy. I've been on the phone with him a bunch. It's just a terrific new friend that I have. It's Arnie King. So join us for that. I want to go on to call on Dorothy Weitzman to tell us a few things in the post-election that are going to be going on in Boston. Dorothy, are you unmuted? Let's see if we have you. Dorothy?
Yes, I'm unmuted. Thank you, Dean. I wrote Dean because I have been learning about what is underway through an organization that Invisible and many others are affiliating with, and it's under the theme of protect the results. That's what the website is, but the events are now multiplying around the country. And in this state, currently, there's 17 locations that you can find out. You can sign up through that website. One is Watertown, which is to me new and close, and I know we have a number of members in Watertown. And they are tentatively scheduled for 3 o'clock on Wednesday. And the overall idea is that These events are tentative and dependent upon activation of the Protect the Results Coalition if Trump takes action to undermine the results. For safety reasons, opposes any events beginning after dark or planned on ballot counting locations. And they are also not yet specifying where exactly the location in most cases. And they come under different themes. One is called Count Every Vote, the one in Amherst, but most of them are Count the Vote. And then the theme of the overall coalition is Protect the Results, or maybe they're called Protect the Election, some of them. So at any rate, I think we could all participate who might feel comfortable being in the location and keeping appraised of them to see whether they are happening and what would happen after them if they do happen, or instead of them if they don't happen. I think that's enough, don't you, Dean?
It's never enough from you, Dorothy. Thank you. And I believe that Jill will be addressing this in her remarks. She mentioned that to me, and I hope everybody is vigilant to rise up and
protect the vote. Protect the vote on the web. Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. If there are any other announcements,
30, 31. 7 unique ones.
I'm sorry, Charlie?
Oh, sorry. I forgot.
If there are any other announcements, folks could put them in the chat and we will mention them later on in the meeting. But I want to go on to a couple of more visuals, show you this beautiful image that comes from our wonderful friend Bennett Hammond. And I loved it so much that I asked Bennett to make a postcard out of it, and I shared the expenses with him, and I have a bunch of these. If any of you want them, just get in touch with me personally. I can send you a few. It's sort of just becoming this theme for our 100th anniversary, and maybe we'll make a big poster and put it on a sandwich board out in front, or have it as a 100th anniversary commemorative poster from Bennett Hammond. I want to do a reading from our regular Eduardo Galeano. Eduardo Galeano, The Book of Days. We opened to November 1st.
Is the audio okay?
And
yes,
the audio is fine. So here's what it says. It's November 1st. Danger, animals. In 1986, mad cow disease struck the British Isles and more than 2 million cows.
Is there a problem with the audio?
Not that I know of. Can everybody hear me? Charlie?
Yes, we can hear you.
In 1986, mad cow disease struck the British Isles and more than 2 million cows suspected of harboring contagious dementia faced capital punishment. In 1996,
just lost the link too.
Dean, you just muted yourself.
Yes.
Somebody else muted me. Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
In 1997, avian flu from Hong Kong sowed panic and condemned 1.5 million birds to premature death. In the year 2009, Mexico and the United States suffered an outbreak of swine flu, and the entire world had to shield itself from the plague. Millions of pigs, no one knows how many, were sacrificed for coughing or sneezing. Who is guilty of causing human disease? Animals.
WHO.
It's that simple. Free of all suspicion are the giants of global agribusiness, those sorcerers' apprentices who turn food into high-potency chemical bombs. I'm sure that if Eduardo Galeano were still with us, he would have a new entry for the COVID-19. We want to welcome back our friends Greg and Terry, Greg Artzner and Terry Leonino from Magpie. Are you there?
Oh, yes,
We are
and
here.
thank you for that
Okay.
meeting. You know, we wanted to sing a song from our hero and sheroes. We have lots of heroes and sheroes, but Pete Seeger obviously has been a very big influence. And, you know, Pete doesn't always just write uplifting songs. He also writes warning songs. And this is one of his warning songs. And although we're singing it to the audience of the converted, it struck me how important it is to say this out loud. The song is called The Last Train to Nuremberg.
Some of you will remember this song perhaps from 1968, and we were, I guess, inspired to choose it out of the title of Dr. Jill's upcoming talk. The Crime of Silence. In 1968, many of us learned about the crime of silence if we hadn't learned it before. The whole idea of the Nuremberg trials was that silence in the face of crime, particularly crime of a government, international crime, is complicity. Last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, all on board. Last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, all on board. Do I see the drones a-flying? Do I see an airborne missile? Do I see the generals and all their crew? Do I see the president? Do I see both houses of Congress? Do I see the voters, me and you? Last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, all on board. Last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, all on board. Who pressed the button? Who gave the orders? Who planned the campaign to lay waste the land? Who manufactured the bullets? Who paid the taxes? Tell me, is this blood upon my head? Last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, all on board. Last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, all on board. Woo! Go tell all the young people, tell all the little children, don't get right aboard that train. See where it's come from, see where it's going, don't you ride it ever again. Last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, all on board. Last train to Nuremberg. Last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, last train to Nuremberg, all on board.
Thank you. Sometimes you just have to sing it and get it out of your system because, you know, I think a lot of us are real concerned and have a real good reason to be.
Neo-fascist. All right, so
This next one is a little different because we wrote it for Oil Change International. Tell them what that's about.
well, Oil Change International is an international non-government organization, and their mission is to break the corrupting grip I get that out of there. Break the corrupting grip that oil profit money has on governments. Great idea. Naturally, we were right on board with them.
We actually
so-
wrote it, we were practicing it at our friend Nadine Block's house. She was one of the members of Clearwater who we met on the boat and have been longtime friends with. And her father was a Republican, and we were struggling trying to find the right lyrics.
And he helped us.
And he helped us.
He helped us to write the song. So, yeah. Anyway, the song is called Follow the Money, and it's got a chorus that you can sing along with. Follow the money from the oil can, from Iraq, Nigeria, to Kazakhstan. I'm in the key of G
Oh, okay.
for governments.
All right.
Are you ready?
Uh-huh.
Follow the money from the oil can, from Iraq, Nigeria, and Kazakhstan. Follow the money from the tanker boats to the halls of Congress where it buys the votes. Follow the money till it makes you sick and you slip and you slide on the thick oil slick. Follow the money, follow the money. Our addiction to oil is at the core, guzzling and guzzling more and more. They keep on drilling to the ends of the earth. How many barrels is a human life worth? How long will it take for us to see somebody owns the powers that be? Follow the money, follow the money, follow the money from the oil can, from Iraq, Nigeria, and Kazakhstan. Follow the money from the tanker boats to the halls of Congress where it buys the votes. Follow the money till it makes you sick and you slip and you slide on a thick oil slick. Follow the money, follow the money. Which politicians stand to gain with big oil money in their campaign? They give and take tax breaks, subsidies. Our pockets are empty and we're on our knees. BP and Halliburton don't have to comply. They got the very best Congress oil money can buy. Follow the money, follow the money. Yeah, follow the money from the oil can, from Iraq, Nigeria, and Kazakhstan. Follow the money from the tanker boats to the halls of Congress where it buys the votes. Follow the money from where it's spent right to the office of the president. Follow the money, follow the money. There is a better way when the people of the world gonna have our say. It's time for all nations to rearrange. It's time for a global oil change. To save this planet, it's not too late. It's time for separation of oil and state. Follow the money, follow the money, follow the money.
money to solar power, free energy every daylight hour. Follow the money to power that's green, and we don't mean the oil dollar machine. Follow the money from the halls of state, from the power of oil, gotta separate. Follow the money, follow the money, follow the money from the oil can, from Iraq, Nigeria, to Kazakhstan. Follow the money from the tanker boats to the halls of Congress where it buys the votes. Follow the money to that makes you sick and you slip and you slide on a big oil slick. Follow the money, follow the money, follow the money, follow the money.
Follow the money. Thank you, Magpie.
You're welcome.
I love that. I love it. I had not heard that before.
Oh, really?
Just great. Is it on a CD?
Yes,
It
it's
is.
actually on the CD that was our 40th anniversary CD that we got. We were able to get Pete Seeger and Tom Paxton to play on that.
7 years ago.
So we'll send you a copy.
Yeah.
Okay, please do. And I'll send you something too. One last little plug for a few things coming up. This next Sunday, the Sunday after the election, our ever perpetual political commentator named Mark Solomon, who has been with us at Community Church since the mid-'60s, will join us again. It's called A Transforming Moment, What Next? November 15th, I already mentioned Arnie King will be joining us after 49 years in prison. He's a free man. The next week after that, November 22nd, Norman Stockwell is a longtime friend of mine, editor of The Progressive. The week after that, after Thanksgiving Sunday, is Dr. Howard Ehrman, Public Health Amidst the Pandemic. I'll go on from there, jump to December when there's a couple of things worth noting. One is that we have Chris Hedges. I watched a YouTube that Chris Hedges put up, or some host put up 4 days before, and there were already 26,000 views. It gives you a sense of this man is just an incredible public intellectual for our time. Chris Hedges will join us on December 13th. December 6th, we bestow the annual Sacco and Vanzetti Memorial Award to Daniel Ellsberg. It's just a really wonderful coup that we happen to have a mutual friend who got us in touch with him, and we had a recording of Daniel Ellsberg speaking at Community Church in 1972. It was amazing the cassette was still playable, but we were able to digitize that and put it up on our SoundCloud page and sent the link to Daniel Ellsberg, and he really lit up and he said, "I'd be honored to join you." So some good things. We also have some great music coming up. Next week is Alastair Mook. The week after that is Reggie Harris. Week after that is Emma's Revolution. The week after that is David Rovics. It's just a hit parade of the music of social change. That sounds weird. Anyway, it's time for Jill Stein.
Yes.
I first knew Jill Stein as a folk performer, leading kids music, environmental earth songs and kids chorus, and then a songwriter doing music with another friend named Kenny Seltzer, and then going deep into politics. And by the way, she happens to be a physician all the while, and going into politics. My favorite memory is that Kenny Seltzer was her campaign manager or head volunteer or something like that, and he asked me to record some political ads in Spanish for Jill, and I had to. I'm pretty fluent, but I had to go back and figure out if it was vote para or vote por, vote for. There's two way, and then it was whether to vote por la doctora Jill Stein, por or para gobernadora. So it was kind of a fun exercise to figure out my por and para. I probably knew it deep down, but I had to refresh it. That was very fun. All these different campaigns later. Jill holds up the flag for the Rainbow Party and inspires us every time she's been here. Jill, we're just incredibly honored and glad that you are with us at Community Church. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Dean, and thanks to all the members of this very honorable community. It's really great to be here, especially on your 100th anniversary, because the Community Church of Boston, just is an incredible source of inspiration and courage in this, in this region, and I'd say all over the world. So, for anybody who's wondering, where is that beacon on the hill that people are talking about? I'd say it's right here in the Community Church, where it shines far brighter than in the other institutions a few blocks away that are, in the public mind are referred to. But this really is where the beacon is. And, to Dean's remarks, I think as the Community Church reflects the spirit of music and the better spirit of politics, and the quote that you read this morning from your founder, reflect that these things all come together. And it was really the music that led me into the political fight, because I felt like after singing about it, I couldn't refuse the opportunity that came my way to actually struggle in a broader arena. So I really see them very much the same. And it's great to be here at this wonderful institution that really reflects how these things come together. So with that, and my screen keeps going on and off here, I think because my cat is busy giving himself a bath. So let me just move him over. Willie, why don't you go down there so you don't jiggle the wires? Hang on. Okay, we'll see if that does the trick. Okay, waiting here just for 1 second to see if the screen is going to come back on. If not, I just won't use that. Okay, so down to the question of the hour, and it's really great to be able to talk with this community at this very, shall we say, stress-free, lighthearted moment that we're in right now, that I think, and I say that facetiously because so many of us are grappling with what's on the horizon and how do we fix it and what are the choices that we have. And so in the interest of that, we have this talk here today, which I've been describing as a pre-election power-up for People, Planet, and Peace. The full title being, how do we get the neo-fascist out without surrendering to the parties of war and Wall Street, which is a real problem. So I'm hoping to connect some of the dots here between this perilous election and the broader crisis, and the crisis which I'm calling here today, and many others have called, end stage empire. That is an empire teetering at the brink, that's exhausted its resources in endless war, that's depleted our budget at home, that's left the empire financially, morally, spiritually pretty broken. And empire is inherently not a politically stable place, and it's not friendly to democracy, and it's inherently vulnerable to demagoguery and fascism. And I think that has a lot to do with why we are where we are today fighting these battles. There's not a quick fix here, but I think most progressives agree that Trump is extraordinarily dangerous. That danger, of course, doesn't end with voting him out of office, if we're able to do that. And it doesn't end there for several reasons, including that his leading opponent, Joe Biden, and the Democratic establishment represent the conditions that gave us Trump and the vulnerability to fascism. And I'll go into what I mean by that, which is, by the way, also what Chris Hedges says. And I'll just mention, I'll be talking tonight in a broadcast with Chris Hedges and also with Richard Wolff, the economist, and and another, the former senator who actually read Daniel Ellsberg's Pentagon Papers into the congressional record. If people remember that, the senator from Alaska. The four of us will be having this discussion tonight, which I think is going to run in a similar vein, and that'll be live on Consortium News, which is a wonderful independent journalism. I believe that's at 7 o'clock. So, you know, if you haven't heard enough this morning and to hear some variants on that viewpoint, join us then. So today, then basically we'll be focusing on, given the reality of empire in decline here, what are the choices before us in this election and what we do afterwards, what we're going to do in the voting booth and what we do out on the street. And I'm going to be holding high here today the examples of Chile and Bolivia, which both just in this past week, does that ring a bell to anybody? Are you aware of what's going on there? It's really very uplifting and inspiring that both of these countries recently broke the stranglehold of fascism. Fascist regimes, in fact, that were imposed by the US empire, and they both broke the stranglehold of fascism. And they did it through a combination of voting and through revolting out in the streets. So it's important to keep that in mind, because a lot of people are absolutely terrified at what may lie before us. So it's important to remember that even in the worst case scenario, there's a way forward here. And, you know, it's on us to do all we can, you know, to get the best outcome here. And I think, you know, I, for one, was just really so uplifted to hear about what grassroots movements were able to achieve in Bolivia and in Chile against the worst fascist threats out there. So whatever happens, there is light at the end of the tunnel if we make it so. So I want to start first by just recognizing key dynamics that are already in motion. First, that empire is in fact teetering at the brink with endless war and austerity and assault on our democracy and on Mother Earth. And at the same time, there is a countercurrent trend, and that is of peaceful uprising. That is in full swing, from the police brutality protests that have brought out unprecedented numbers, millions of people into the streets, wildcat strikes, rent boycotts, mutual aid networks, and so on. These are two really full trends, and there is a well-established revolt against rapacious oligarchy that is relentlessly growing. And it's driven by the crises in virtually every dimension of our lives. That is crushing inequality, economic hardship, global pandemic, climate catastrophe, white supremacy, endless war, and more. You don't have to look at many economic indicators to see why rebellion is virtually inevitable and why it's happening. That is, you know, 52 million people now are expected to suffer food insecurity in the coming year. 40% of renters are at risk of losing their homes. 60 million newly unemployed, 8 million more added to the poverty rolls just since the end of COVID relief, the failure of huge numbers of businesses. This isn't being fixed. And, you know, if a candidate has not committed to fixing it during the election, you can pretty well be assured they are not going to do it after the fact if you haven't been able to extract concessions before they're elected when you actually have some power. It's not going to happen. And you can just remember back to the disappointments in the Obama era, where all sorts of promises were made and then quickly broken, which left, you know, tens of millions of workers basically thrown under the bus, which has everything to do with what generated then this backlash against the Democratic Party and against what people thought of as politics as usual. Unfortunately, you know, Trump is just a big charade, so he's not by any means the solution. But there are a lot of people who, you know, who are subject to the demagoguery here. And historically, this is exactly what happens in times of incredible economic stress. And, you know, we are in a time of economic stress on steroids, where you see not only the economic numbers crashing, but even the health of working people. And, you know, it's been noted that the health of the white working class in particular has taken an absolute nosedive. And, you know, we are, I think, the only developed economy in the world that's actually taken a U-turn, and we're actually reversing the progress that has been made in expanding lifespan and health and all that. So these are unbelievably stressful times. And remember that this economic stress is superimposed on an economy that was already really struggling with incredible disparities, with half of Americans in or near poverty. Sorry, my dog is now jiggling my wires here. And at the same time, you have 3 billionaires holding as much as half of the entire American population. And those billionaires now, in fact, have increased their wealth, while the bread lines are miles long in these car pickups from the food pantries. The bread lines are up to 4 miles long. It's unbelievable. While the people are struggling, the billionaires have increased their wealth, in fact, by $1 trillion. So, you know, this is not getting fixed, and it's not getting fixed on both parts. And in the comments that Biden has made in advance about whether there's going to be another bailout for COVID, he's basically said that we can't afford it, which is consistent with his economic history. So we can rest assured that the uprising is going to grow no matter which party is in power. And with that as a backdrop, we can turn now to the question of, so what do we do? You know, how do we do our best to defeat the neo-fascist in the White House without surrendering to the forces that put him there? That is, the parties of war on Wall Street that trashed working people and generated this kind of irrational and crazed backlash that is typical of extreme right-wing movements. This is when they develop, you know, in post-World War I Germany that embraced Nazism. You know, it was in the context of incredible economic hardship. So first, I want to say a couple words about lesser evilism, because often people resign themselves to voting for the lesser evil. That's what we, quote, have to do. That's the practical thing. And bear in mind, I am not here to stump for a particular way to vote, because I really recognize that different people are in different places, geographically, politically, etc. There are different ways people can vote. But I just want to recognize some factors here that play into these decisions. So the thing about lesser evilism, it's often put out there as a solution, but it's really important to recognize how it is very much not a solution. It basically kicks the can down the road and allows things to keep going the way they are. We widely recognize that the greater evil is a deadly threat because of war, climate change, the economy, mass incarceration, white supremacy, you name it. But it's important to know that the lesser evil is also a driver of these deadly conditions, although perhaps less quickly. However, the lesser evil also basically empowers the greater evil. And why do I say that? Well, to put it another way, the economist Michael Hudson says, Trump, in fact, was a legacy of the Obama era and Obama's policies. That is, bailing out Wall Street to the tune of trillions of dollars, while working people were thrown under the bus. 5 million people were allowed to have their homes essentially stolen from them. While there was a massive upward transfer of wealth, the decimation of the middle class. In fact, 95% of all of the huge economic gains of that era went to the top 1%, while 80% lost, and many of them lost big time, especially poor people and people of color. So, you know, we also had the largest boom in fossil fuel expansion in history, the expansion of endless wars, the attack on civil liberties, mass deportations. That is, you know, in other words, throwing people under the bus generates the kind of severe economic insecurity that makes people susceptible to demagoguery and fascism in the first place. So, oh, and then also lesser evil voting flies in the face of what we can call the Frederick Douglass principle. his principle that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. If you silence that demand, you lose your ability to fight the power of the economic and political elite. If you self-censor, if you silence political opposition and resistance, all hope is lost for fighting the power. That's essentially was the lesson that Frederick Douglass learned and which he taught and stated so very powerfully. So, that's another reason you don't want to just totally silence political opposition. That's a very dangerous thing. And then also remember that Democratic Party leadership, that is leadership of the lesser evil, has been silencing its progressive leadership for a long time. Just look at the recent convention, the DNC convention, which eliminated all progressive voices, but brought in a bunch of Republican neocons, to say that this is the new party. And, everybody else was virtually silenced, and they have continued to be. And this is not new. This is what the Democratic Party has done ever since the Second World War. You may have heard the story about how the socialist Henry Wallace was about to get the vice presidential nomination, which would have put him next in line when FDR was going to die, and it was known he would not survive his third term. So the VP was essentially the next, the nomination of the next president, and his nomination was blocked by the pulling of the fire alarm, the declaring of a fire emergency, pulling the fire alarm and clearing the convention, and then some mad behind the scenes organizing that substituted for Henry Wallace, this activist, this peacemaker, this world-renowned advocate for human, economic, and social rights. He was substituted for by Henry Truman, who then instead gave us the Cold War and the nuclear bomb and Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we've been fighting that Cold War essentially ever since. So it's important to recognize who's in charge in the Democratic Party and to have realistic expectations about where we're going with that, which again, to my mind, really underscores the importance of continuing to offer an alternative. So how do we, and of course, people are aware that Bernie Sanders was sabotaged twice, including in the most recent campaign, where there was really an orchestrated, coordinated effort to shut him down when he was going full speed ahead towards the nomination. So, that's in whose hands people are putting their trust here if you allow yourself to be silenced. Yet at the same time, clearly we want to get Trump out. So there's this little bit of a dialectic. How do we assert progressive power and still get rid of Trump? So I want to just go through several options to make the point that it's not just an either or. And also I want to acknowledge most people here have probably voted already. Just signal if you have already voted. Okay, yeah, so it's most people. Nonetheless, it may be 30 or 40% of Massachusetts which hasn't. So, we all talk to our friends and so on. So, I think this discussion is not irrelevant. It's not completely obsolete. And it's probably not the last time that we're going to be confronted with this kind of choice. It happens all the time. So it's not just like a one or the other. It's not, you've either got to be all green or all blue. And again, I say this without judgment or voter shaming. So I want to run through some of the options here to resist Trump, but at the same time, not totally give in and silence opposition to the parties of war on Wall Street. So number one here on the list is ranked choice voting. Question two, are people familiar with that, with ranked choice voting? It's really critical for a long-term solution. Lets you rank your choices instead of voting for just one. And I am strongly advocating for yes on two, by the way, if you know anybody who hasn't voted yet. And it ensures that you never throw your vote away by voting for a candidate who, quote, can't win, because if your first choice loses, your vote automatically goes to your second choice. It's impossible for an underdog to spoil the election or to split the vote. So it gets rid of that whole, voter shaming and silencing thing. And that enables candidates from third parties and marginalized communities to be heard and to actually be contenders, not silenced as fearsome spoilers. And it gives us more voices and more choices. And as you know, that's what people are really hungering for right now. And we know that even in this time of hyperpartisanship, polls show that 60% of Americans want to have a third party and believe that without it, we cannot have a functioning democracy. So ranked choice voting lets us get down to debating the issues rather than debating your right to have choices or your right to expect more than just two representatives of corporate America and the war industry and so on. So ranked choice voting, is really critical. You may know that it's currently running ahead about 48 to 43% as of the last poll, with 9% undecided. So if you do know people who aren't, who haven't voted yet, you can put in a plug for ranked choice voting. Then just to run through very quickly a couple other possibilities, you can vote against Trump by voting green. We could talk about the whole spoiler mythology, which in my view is very much it's a tool of political repression. It's based on cherry picking the numbers. It's really not valid, but many people are still very sensitive to all the abuse you get for it, and are concerned about that. But here's another approach. If you don't feel like you can vote the way your heart tells you to, here's another approach. If you vote blue, register green. That way you can get the desired effect in terms of the election, but you also don't silence yourself, and you ensure that that threat to power is still there. So consider that. Or you can vote green in safe states and vote blue in swing states. Or you can vote blue for president and vote green down ballot. There are many ways to mix and match here, but I think the take-home lesson is don't allow yourself to be silenced. In the interest of time, I'm just going to move forward really quickly now, and I want to acknowledge that there is this potential for an election day coup, as one of the previous speakers was mentioning. We're going to hear more about that afterwards, but that is a real threat because, as we know, Trump has refused to agree to a peaceful transfer of power. He's also stacked the Supreme Court with justices who were a part of the stolen election in 2000. He has dog whistled to the Proud Boys and to other militias, which are, by the way, illegal. They're illegal everywhere in the United States. He's mobilized 50,000 so-called poll watchers, which are, a tool for voter suppression. And there are a couple ways that, and there are a whole other variety of ways that the vote is being suppressed that we won't go into, but there are a couple ways that this could go forward. One is if the Supreme Court stops the vote count, and they would use the excuse that there have been fraudulent votes in the mail-ins and in the absentee ballots. State legislatures can also reject the vote and then appoint their own set of electors. And they can do this just because they decide to do it. Republican legislatures do have the power to do this. And, that can also stack the election. So there are very good reasons to be extremely vigilant right now. And if there is, an effort to stop the vote, there are many groups that are working right now to to help us get out in the street. And I want to just mention quickly the examples of Bolivia and Chile, only to say that they beat back fascism. They didn't do it the same day, but they both beat back their fascist coups. It took Chile 30 years. It took Bolivia all of 1 year, but they did that by just consistent, hard-fought action in the street, peaceful uprising in the street, but it was consistent. And It eventually involved general strikes in both areas. And basically, they were insisting on the right to a vote. They finally got that right to vote, which both countries were trying to suppress. They got that right to vote, and they were able to vote out the fascist regimes in various ways. In Chile, they actually voted to have a new constitution written, which will be written by people, not by politicians. So these are really exciting victories. And it makes the point that we need to be ready to mobilize and to actually be out there in the streets peacefully, but asserting people power. And I can put some of the links up in the chat afterwards, but I'll just name some of the resources right out there. One of them is Grassroots Election Protection, and that's abbreviated Grassroots EP for electionprotection.org. And they are focusing on how to protect voters and our votes right now, how to get out there and assist with the with your local election boards and poll workers and observe the votes to be sure that they're not going to be destroyed. Stopping the Coup, a 2020 guide, which is put out by Shutdown DC, very good resource. Open resources for upholding our democracy from the New America Foundation. And Protect the Results, which is the group that I think was mentioned previously. They're holding now over 400 demonstrations, which are tentatively scheduled depending on what goes forward. And that's really the way it's got to be planned. There has to be a placeholder now because it's going to be too late if we're first organizing this Wednesday morning. And if militias show up or people show up with arms, there's a very helpful resource at the Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection. And they have a fact sheet for every state that informs you who to tell, what to do, how to basically stop any trouble from people showing up with arms at the voting place. And finally, I just want to end noting that a general strike is where we would need to go, that simply getting out and demonstrating by itself doesn't amount to a whole lot. And the examples of Chile and Bolivia and countless other countries are really important here. So it's important for us to organize and to note that many labor groups and are networking with a whole variety of social movements now to actually begin consideration of this. So the bottom line is, we need to dismantle empire, and we need to resist the parties of war in Wall Street that are joined at the hip with that empire. And we need to do that if we're going to restore the promise of democracy and basically our lives that depend on it. So thank you all so much for being a part of this. And I'll turn it back to you, Dean, and hopefully we're going to hear another song now from Magpie. And thank you so much for all your inspiration here, Magpie and everybody here today. Thank you.
Bill Stein, you inspire us. It's lovely to hear from you again and hear your words. I have a beautiful basket here. This is from Uganda, and it was purchased last year during a holiday craft fair in Jamaica Plain. You remember holiday craft fairs? I think they're canceled for this year, unfortunately, but it's I'm putting my check in there. You can figuratively or virtually put your check in at www.communitychurchofboston.org. There's a credit card and a PayPal option for you. You can also send a check to our address, which is in the chat section, 565 Boylston Street, Boston, Massachusetts, 02116. Someday we'll be together here again in this lonely auditorium. I want to mention that not on this side, but on this side, there's a new backdrop that I don't know if you can see it well, but it's a beautiful urban skyline from Copley Square, and it has no justice, no peace in front of it, and it has Community Church of Boston 100th anniversary. Thank you, Crystal Rollins Jackson, our just extraordinary office and publications manager for that new backdrop. And I want to say that you should check out Magpie's recordings. You can probably find them at their website or personally from them, because we're going to hear one last song from Magpie, do I have any other business to take care of? No, that's it. Magpie, one more song, and then we'll have a Q&A and conversation with Jill.
We first
Excellent.
want to thank you, Dean, for organizing all this, and your friends, Charlie, and all the people making it possible for Jill to speak, for us to sing. I mean, we need each other. We applaud you for everything you do.
And thank you, Jill, for that very informative and in a lot of cases reminder about things that we're facing.
You're not the right kid.
There we are. This is a song that we wrote kind of loosely based on something that Pete Seeger said, and we just sort of took it, I guess, to the next level and said, well, this is what we're all about. Not building walls, but about building the world that we want to see, building the world we want to live in. And we originally wrote this song with 5 verses, but we discovered that when we sing all 5 verses, the song goes on for about 10 minutes.
It's too long.
So
We had to
we
edit.
could, but so we've chosen the 3 verses that I think are probably a little bit most connected with what we're doing here today, what we're facing on Tuesday, words that Jill gave us. And the song is called "Build the World," and you can sing on the chorus. We'll sing a line, then you just repeat that as a response. And I'm going to do that at the end of the song. So here it is.
Build the world that we want to see, where we live in peace, from fear we're free, false borders fall, we'll join hand in hand, till the arc of justice touches every land. Sing it with us. Build the world that we want to see, where we live in peace, from fear we're free, false borders fall, we'll join hand in hand, till the arc of justice touches every land. With the people's will shall never fail to rout the tyrant and support the frail, seek the righteous path of honesty in the high and haughty of low degree, where every soul gets what they need, no one takes more by graft and greed, work, wealth, joy, hardship we'll all share, and no one will yearn to be a billionaire. Build the world that we want to see, where we live in peace, from fear we're free, false borders fall, we'll join hand in hand, till the arc of justice touches every land. Where no vote's suppressed, no trade deferred, and every person's voice is heard, where rights remain uninterrupted, and elected ones stand uncorrupted, where rule is not by stolen power, all can speak out and not cower, where money can't defeat the choice made by the power of the people's voice. Build the world that we want to see, where we live in peace, from fear we're free, false borders fall, we'll join hand in hand, till the arc of justice touches every land. Where in compassion all people live, and the noblest action is to forgive, with
one another we seek accord. Respect and dignity are restored. Where armies stand down everywhere, swords finally become plowshares. Tranquility will then increase when weapons of war shall rust in peace. Build the world that we want to see, where we live in peace. From fear we're free, false borders fall, we'll join hand in hand till the ark of justice touches every land. Build the world that we want to see, where we live in peace. From fear we're free, false borders fall, we'll join hand in hand till the ark of justice touches every land. Till the ark of justice touches every land.
Thank you all.
Terry, thanks for joining us today. It's just such a incredible enhancement to our souls and to this meeting here. I'm remembering now what I forgot to tell you before their song, which is about this building. Two things I want to tell you, which is that we rely heavily on the rent from our first floor restaurant. And that restaurant was closed for 3 months during the beginning of pandemic, and we have had to make huge concessions, rent concessions to them. They're reopened and just doing takeout, and will soon be sort of back in the saddle, but that's been a difficult thing. The other thing to tell you is that in spite of that setback, we are embarking on a really wonderful, ambitious thing, which we've worked on very hard all summer, which is installing electric heat pump heat in this entire building. And it's going to mean that we're not using fossil fuels for any heat or air conditioning in this building. And it's what's made it really possible during this difficult time is that we have joined in a program with Eversource that takes a few pennies from your electric bill and engages in these programs, and they are paying for about 2/3 of the enormous cost of heat pumps for a 5-story building, and we will cover the rest of it. So it's an amazing thing, and it's going to really green up our building, or at least be the first step. I mean, we have a bunch of other things. We have big window work, big insulation work, and just a lot of low-hanging fruit around energy efficiency. So I wanted to just tell you that. Jill, I wanted to say to you before we open the Q&A that you joined the ranks of speakers at Community Church that were alternative candidates and alternative voices. Henry Wallace spoke here 3 times during the 50s, and we found one of the texts of his speeches, and we're going to digitize that and put it up on our website. Another one is named Norman Thomas, and I believe he was the Socialist Party candidate many times during the 30s, 40s, 50s. I just ordered a biography of Norman Thomas and just starting to delve into it. Really fascinating story. So, Jill, you're in good company here. That's all I have to say. How shall we do the Q&A? If those on video would like to raise their hands, I immediately see Barry's hand. Let's unmute Barry. And
I think I'm unmuted.
okay, go ahead, Barry.
Okay.
I'm in favor of ranked choice voting, but I wanted to mention that yesterday by chance, well, maybe not by chance because the elections came up, I was discussing ranked choice voting with a woman friend of mine who lives in Burlington, Vermont. Actually, I'm on my way back. That's where I am right now. And she described to me, and I hope I don't have the details completely wrong, but Burlington had ranked choice voting. They called it instant runoff, like around 15 years ago. And then a few years later, they elected a mayor that she described everyone thought was a disaster. And they repealed through citizens vote, you know, they repealed it because they blamed ranked choice voting for getting this bad mayor. It was actually, are you familiar with that? I don't know why it failed. I mean, if the number, I could think of mathematical ways that it could fail, but I am a scientist and good in arithmetic. Are you familiar with that case? And how can that be avoided?
I'm not familiar with that case. What I can tell you is that there are now like 20 or 24 states and major cities that are using it and that have consistently used it. There are also many countries around the world that use it. It's not a silver bullet. It doesn't fix everything. It doesn't stop bad apples from getting into the process. But what it does do is ensure that winners are not produced that have no support. The person who wins has to have majority support, otherwise you can't win. And, you know, it helps create a more civil dialogue because candidates have to appeal to each other's bases in order to win, because you have to get everybody behind you. So on the whole, the experience with it has been fabulous. And you can just look at the state of Maine. You know, the people who tend not to like ranked choice voting are political elites, power holders who don't want competition. And the system that we have, so-called plurality voting or first past the post, where anybody can win. You know, if you have 35% of the vote, you can win as long as you have more than other people who may be all dividing up the vote among each other. And in first past the post, money and power are very determinative. So Democrats and Republicans often don't like it. And we're lucky that they have not taken a position against it in this state. And it may be because they know that, you know, they have a spoiler threat, so-called, if they don't embrace it. And what ranked choice voting does is make sure that there's no possibility of spoiling an election or dividing a vote. So that's the thing that, you know, if you look at Maine, the legislature has tried to repeal it 3 times. And each time it's gone back to the people who've run another referendum and brought it back again. So what I would say is that the evidence shows that everyday people really like it. We don't like being stuck with just 2 candidates chosen by the parties of war on Wall Street. We really like having more choices and more voices, and people tend to bring it back time after time.
I just want to follow up. I actually live in Cambridge, so I'm familiar with it.
Great.
I just happen to be visiting Burlington.
I see. Very interesting. I'll check into that because I'd be interested to know what.
Yeah,
thanks for the heads up.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Leonard Lerman, I saw your hand.
Yes. Hello. Hello, Jill.
Hi, Leonard. Whoa.
I think I've known Jill longer than anybody else on this call, at least 51 years, a bicycle date. And And then Marat Sade, where she sang, "Marat, we're poor and the poor stay poor. We want our revolution now," as Charlotte Corday at Adams House in 1970. I remember you very fondly, Jill, and drove you around when you were having trouble with the debate in Hofstra in Brooklyn. I love you very dearly, and I belong to the Green Party largely because of you. But I'm glad that you said that you would accept an alternative of registering green and voting blue. Because I think it is absolutely essential at this point. Now, I'm calling from New York State, where we have a little bit of a different situation than Massachusetts. The governor became enraged when the Working Families Party did not support him. And so he got the legislature to raise the threshold of votes necessary to be on the ballot, which has endangered the Working Families Party and probably killed the Green Party in New York State, as far as the ballot is concerned. I've been urged to vote for the Green Party, but frankly, I think that it's kind of hopeless at this point because 130,000 votes they're not going to get. And the Working Families Party is going to have to work hard to get that. So I'm planning to vote. I haven't voted yet, but I'm planning to vote on Tuesday for the Democrats on the Working Families Party. This is exactly what Elizabeth Warren has been telling people to do. Go to the Working Families Party. Well, I don't know. They're not a color. They're not a blue or green, are they? But they're somewhere in between, I think. But Jill, I want to urge you to do something that I've urged you before, and that is as a minority member of the Green Party, which I think my view is shared by at least some people, maybe even people like Medea Benjamin, who's a good friend from Code Pink, because she's spoken with you and has spoken also about this. I think that the Green Party in this country has really got to consider the alternative path that has been that of the Green Party in other countries like Germany and New Zealand. By the way, the head of Amnesty International, who in New Zealand is a friend of mine, will be speaking to the New York Green Party in a couple of weeks. The Green Party in these other countries is not opposed to coalition politics, to endorsing candidates in order to stop really bad candidates like the one in the White House now. And I know you and I had this conversation 4 years ago when I said I'm terrified of President Trump, and you said I am too, but I'm also terrified of President Hillary. Now I can understand that, but I don't sympathize with it. I think that it was right to vote for you in the solid states, but to vote for you in the green state in the swing states was very regrettable. And my dear friend Katha Pollitt has taken you to task on that very severely, much more severely than I would. I think she's too hard on you. But I think you should not have run in the swing states, just as I think Ralph Nader shouldn't have run in the swing states in 2000, because look what we got. And I know you're going to defend yourself and say that people who voted for you would not necessarily have voted Democrat, but we don't know that. All that we do know is that the number of votes that you got was greater than the number of votes that was the difference in those swing states.
So let me just fill out the facts here, because the facts matter, and the numbers matter. You know, you can talk to Greens who voted Green in 2012, and as a rule, they will tell you that they otherwise would not have voted. But, you know, don't just leave it to people you happen to talk to. There are several polls that were done by the likes of ABC and, you know, reliable polling organizations that showed that 60%, 61% actually of Green voters would not have voted. And of the others who would have, a full third of them, would have voted for Donald Trump, just like, you know, some Sanders supporters voted for Trump in the absence of a truly progressive mainstream candidate. But beyond that, you're discounting, you know, you're cherry picking the data, you're discounting the impact of Gary Johnson. Because if you're going to say that Democrats owned Green votes, well, then Republicans owned Libertarian votes, and he got 3 times as many. So had you prevented alternative parties or tried to shame them out of running, you in fact would have enhanced Donald Trump's victory. So the solution to a flawed democracy is not to make it more undemocratic. It's not to silence the voices of opposition to war on Wall Street, which are absolutely critical if we're going to get out of here alive. The solution is to expand the democracy and enact ranked choice voting. And that's the solution here. Short of that, it is cherry picking. You can look at Wisconsin, for example, where the margin was something like 22,000, and we got a little bit more than that. But the reality is that over 200,000 Democrats did not come out and vote in Wisconsin. So you're supposed to say like, oh, it's the fault of the opposition party to opposing, a corrupt corporate party that can't bring people out. So let's silence the opposition to that corporate party. Had we
No, I'm not saying that, Jill. Some people are saying that. I agree, and that's not what I'm saying. Look, I still love you, and I'm still a member of the Green Party. But I think that the idea of considering coalition politics, the way the Working Family Party has done, is something that the Greens really should not just throw out and really should consider. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, that's certainly a point that's worthy of discussion, but I will say that, had I not been in the race, we wouldn't have the Green New Deal. I was ridiculed for suggesting that there be a student debt bailout, that reparations are, a critical part of the agenda. And Medicare for All was launched by Ralph Nader in the 2000 election. Greens basically push the envelope, and then the Democratic Party gives it lip service, and that's the only way that we make progress. But in the case of the Working Families Party, they cave, and they have repeatedly caved to the demands of Cuomo. Not all the time, but it is, you can go back over the history of independent parties and where parties affiliate. And this is different from coalition building. I agree there should be coalitions, but you have to be taken seriously. We have gone to Democrats innumerable times and offered to structure arrangements, and we're always ignored. They refuse to deal with us. So I'd say, yeah, get us together around a table and we'll go from there. I agree with you completely. Coalition building is absolutely essential. And that's one of the things that happens when you have the voting system, so-called proportional representation, where parties have to deal with each other. They have to form coalitions in order to govern. So that's definitely the way that we should go. But I'd say you definitely want to read the other literature to see what the real facts are in the spoiler argument, because it really is a matter of cherry picking the data in order to silence political opposition, without which we have no hope of a democracy.
Thank you, Jill. I'm glad we're on the same side of at least one thing.
We should get on to other questions. Marilyn's got her hand up.
Okay, Marilyn, go ahead, or would you like to read me to read the chat? Go ahead.
No, I can, because I want to add one thing. I think that the ideas like Green New Deal, those kind of ideas are not necessarily the main function of a political party. Those ideas, I think, come more from the street and from demonstrations. A political party needs to build real power. So my question is, what percent of local and state legislators are Green Party? What percent of organizers of different progressive street demonstrations are Green Party? In other words, how much power has the Green Party been building? Clearly not on a national level, but what's happening locally?
So let me put this in context. Greens prioritize local action, and we are at the heart of the climate movement and the workers' rights movement and the women's and the racial justice movement. We are there. But it's really important when you think about small parties, compare the Green Party not to the Democrats. You need to compare us to every other small non-corporate opposition party, like the parties that that Dean was mentioning before, like the Socialists, like Peace and Freedom, like the Citizens Party. Small parties have a 10-year lifespan, and then they are shut down. They are shut down. The powers that be do not tolerate political opposition. They are shut down at the national level. They are shut down at the local level. They are shut down in every way, including through what Leonard was talking about, through ballot access rules, through being shut out of the media, being excluded from debates. You know, the minute Democrats take up our ideas, they take off like a wildfire. And you're absolutely right, Marilyn. You have to be there at the grassroots levels. You can't do this through politics alone. You have to have social movements as well, and you have to be fundamentally local. But you know, Greens are doing that. We've had over 1,000 people elected to local office, and we've had many thousands of candidates, but we are always on a very steep playing field. It's important to put Greens in the context of small parties. Peace and Freedom used to have nationwide representation as on the ballot. They're now fought back to one state. Or you can look at the socialists who've basically been censored out of all participation. You could look at the socialist alternative. They have one person elected on one city council. As Greens, we have many city councilors. We've had a couple of legislators, but like all other small parties that are non-corporate, we are a threat. And in the same way that I was attacked, Bernie Sanders was attacked, Tulsi Gabbard was attacked, the minute you open your mouth and the minute you stand up against the war machine, you will be savaged, you know. And I was investigated for 3 years by the Senate Intelligence Committee for daring to attend an international conference where I was advocating for a peace offensive in the Middle East, for nuclear disarmament and a global Green New Deal. For that, I had to deal with 3 years of harassment and investigation that only recently concluded with a complete clean bill of health. But of course, they didn't broadcast that. They only broadcast, you know, the accusations that you know, that I was a you know, a Putin puppet. You know, so the machine is extremely hostile to the forces and the voices for peace and justice. You know, what happened to Martin Luther King, you know, or to Malcolm X for that matter? You know, it's a badge of honor to be that much of a threat. And you know, in fact, the words that are often attributed to Gandhi are that first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. When they start to fight you, it means they are really concerned, and they are very concerned, you know, because polls now, even in this hyper-partisan moment, you know, polls still show that the overwhelming majority of people are hungering for something else. They don't believe that these two parties can deliver. And another poll done about a year ago showed that 70% of people, this was a poll done by the Wall Street Journal, 70% of people are not just fed up with the two parties, they are fighting angry at the two parties. And you can be sure that has gone through the roof with the way that everyday working people are being treated now, while the sponsors of the corporate political parties are rolling in dough. You know, their wealth has expanded by over $1 trillion, and that's just for billionaires alone. So people are pissed off, and the parties of empire are quaking in their boots that this is going to take off. And it's only a question of when. People are going to be out in force. You can count on that, because there are no plans in the works right now to relieve the incredible crises that are coming down on people's heads. So people are going to be out in force, and they're going to be looking for political voices that can stand up against these political machines that have brought this to bear. And, you know, I know there are a lot of progressive Democrats out there who are doing the right thing, but none of them will take on the war machine. They don't. They just don't. And you cannot spend 60% of your discretionary budget on endless wars that endanger us and the rest of the world. They don't make us safer. You cannot take on the crisis that we have here at home unless you also take on the outrageous and abusive war machine that is pulling the strings in both parties. And it's gotten worse. This is not getting better, and the Democrats are equally guilty of this as Republicans. They've become at least as much the warmongers right now with Russia and China. This is an extremely dangerous moment. And it's very important that we be able to talk about this, and that's why they've got to shut down debate. Polls also show, I should mention, twice as many people now oppose the war budget and want to see it cut. Twice as many support cutting the military as those do who say they want a strong military. So the powers that be are very worried that these issues are going to find each other, and because they're joined at the hip. As Martin Luther King said, the triple evils are militarism, economic predation, and racism. They go hand in hand. And these are powerful movements now that are fighting these three things, and they are finding each other out in the street. So hold on to your hats.
Charlie, thank you for being our tech guru and our bouncer and our referee on this meeting. And you have a question, yes?
Yes. There's a lot of talk about lesser evil politics, but sometimes it takes years to figure out who the greater or lesser evil is. I was listening to Talk Nation Radio, which was rebroadcast this morning by Peace and Justice Radio, which I encourage you to listen to on WZBC. But they had the story of Jimmy Carter and how he got us into the Afghanistan, and how they baited Russia into, they created Osama bin Laden and all the other radicals that we're talking about today. And this is Jimmy Carter, our lesser evil president.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that, Charlie. You're absolutely right. And, we're going on 30 years now. 20 years? Which is it? 20, 30? A long time.
30 years in Afghanistan.
And when Donald Trump pretends that he's going to withdraw troops, everybody freaks out. And he's attacked by Democrats and neocons alike. At the mere suggestion, which should not be taken seriously, but he does, suggest that he's going to take troops out. Of course, he really hasn't done that in his 4 years. Why should he do it now, except for political, expedience? But yeah, I think, Charlie, you're making a very important point, which is not, it's not able to, the people you were mentioning at Talk Nation Radio, that's David Swanson, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is amazing. I mean, he so deserves to be heard far and wide. And I really underscore what Charlie said about listening to Talk Nation Radio or going to David Swanson's website, which I think is davidswanson.com, or you can just Google him. He's all over the place. He's a very prolific writer. And he really tells it like it is about the war machine, and just has really wonderful, heartwarming things to say.
Ed, I see your hand up.
Yes, hi. Hi, Jill.
Hi.
Am I coming through? One of the worries that I have recently is the change in media. What has happened since 2016 with the WikiLeaks and the Hillary emails, something recent has happened in the last year, and it's the censorship of our search results when we go to Google, and also the censorship when we look at Facebook or Twitter. Basically, it's cutting out the views that are on the right and views that are on the left, and keeping the ones in the center. So things like Syria, the Russian hacking, Bolivia, and there's nothing that you can find on most of the media that's negative to Joe Biden. I was just wondering what you think about that sort of issue.
I couldn't agree with you more, Ed. I think there was very good reason that our founders put freedom of the press into the basic Bill of Rights, because you cannot have a democracy unless you have an informed electorate And you can't have an informed electorate unless you have a free press that can cover what's happening. And I couldn't agree with you more. You know, in my view, we are in a really dark moment of censorship right now, and it doesn't stand alone. If you look back over the era of McCarthyism, which we are in again right now, but historically McCarthyism was this marriage of political repression and an attack on alternative parties and voices. It was political repression and censorship and warmongering of the Cold War. You know, this is sort of like the politics of empire. This is what it looks like. And, you know, to my mind, it's really hard to fight one of these things alone. You kind of have to fight them in concert with each other, but it's absolutely a priority, and it makes independent media so extremely valuable. So, you know, you had Glenn Greenwald just stepping back from The Intercept. He just resigned from The Intercept, because even though The Intercept covers a lot of stuff, they too take a partisan stance on some things. And, you know, if you heard Glenn's explanation, he founded it so that he could say what he wanted to say. He wasn't looking for a job. He wants to express himself, and he's got really important, you know, and kind of novel perspectives, incredibly valuable perspectives on things. But The Intercept is just like a drop in the bucket. Censorship in The Intercept is like minute compared to what's going on, you know, like on MSNBC, where they regularly fire, you know, Donahue and just a whole slew of reporters who dare to stand up. And, you know, I think good press is a lifeline. It's really sad to see Democracy Now! Has really taken a step back, maybe because they have some big money funding or what, who knows. But a lot of the sources we used to look to have gotten really gun shy now, and they won't cover controversial stuff, especially around Julian Assange and whistleblowers, around independent third parties, around the war. But let me just shout out a couple of them that are great. The Gray Zone Project, I recommend you look at it. They get bashed all the time for daring to challenge the conventional mythology. Consortium News, which Hedges and I and Rick Wolf will be doing tonight. If you have others, shout them out, because I think people here know there are any number of this really valuable independent institutions.
Jill, what did Democracy Now! Step back on? What are you referring to?
Well, on Russiagate, on Venezuela, they really won't cover the full story. On U.S. intervention in Latin America in general, they've really gotten very gun shy, as the Democrats have sort of taken up. The Democrats used to have a progressive position about U.S. intervention in Latin America. They don't anymore. They're right there cheering on the troops and the coups and all that. Even in Bolivia, where it was really obvious that the U.S. was instigating with the OAS this horrible coup in order to throw out a socialist president who had been democratically reelected. Democracy Now! Refused to cover that, sadly. So check out some of the good sources and be sure that you listen to them and support them.
Let's see, anybody else? Do I see, yes, go ahead, Ruth.
Yeah, Jill, you mentioned a general strike, and I'm definitely very concerned about the day after the election and have been writing on protect the results and encouraging people to be involved. But most of us on this call have white hair. In terms of our role in a general strike, what would you think would be things that we should be doing?
So, you know, sometimes the general strike also has components which are economic boycott. You know, and helping to direct our efforts, you know, to be consistent with boycotts is helpful. But let me say, I think the most important thing, you know, is for us to just be on the watch for it right now and ready to plug in. Because in plugging in, you know, any good strike will give different, you know, different groups different tasks. So sometimes it's, you know, it's helping to get the word out, it's propagating emails, It can be posting messages on social media if you do social media, otherwise on emails. There's lots of communication stuff that can help. Sometimes there's research that needs to be done that you can do from the comfort of your own home. Yeah, right. So it's not all about getting out and demonstrating. Sometimes it's just.
Yeah, but beyond demonstrating, I mean, I know there's places here in Boston, Tremont Street. There'll be something right across from the State House the day after the election. But when we talk about a general strike, which has had an important role at times in our history, especially out on the West Coast, I'm just not sure what that would mean for me. What would I do if I wanted to participate in a general strike?
So, it might be that, that we don't go to Amazon, for example, that we may direct our economic and consumer activity in certain recommended ways. There may be particular targets. It might be calling your legislators, and helping to generate other phone calls. It might be participating in a phone tree. It might be assistance with phone banking. So, general strikes, I think we've all gotten really behind the 8 ball because they haven't been used here since the 1940s. And you're right, I think the last general strike that was declared was on the West Coast with the longshoremen in I think in the Bay Area, and it was like 1946. So we've completely forgotten what to do. So, I think we all just kind of hold hands, and we are all about to take a wild ride and learn how to do this. Even just like researching what's the history of general strikes would be really helpful. In the Green Party, the Green Rainbow Party, we're in the process of trying to do that right now.
Well, maybe feeding people who are striking.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Providing support for striking workers is
right.
So, yeah, and helping to raise money for them too, so they have wages to live with. There's just all kinds of stuff that we all have to remind ourselves about. And some of the unions are beginning to take leadership on this now. There's been some interesting press about several union networks, some in Western Massachusetts, one in I think Rochester, New York, and one other, I don't remember, it might be like the airline workers union, that are starting to sort of lead this process to get the discussion going and to help everybody start getting organized around how exactly would this happen. So very good question.
Mike, I think we've got time for one more. Mike Heischman, who's probably Community Church's most committed Green Rainbow activist. Go ahead.
Joe, first of all, congratulations on your victory against the United States government. I'm looking forward to hearing that story. For good reasons, Trump has been criticized for his mishandling of the coronavirus. Unfortunately, I think the Democrats have been left off the hook. So my question to you is, how have the Democrats for decades and for recently have been complicit in the lack of preparation for the coronavirus and other health disparities? Earlier in your speech, you pointed out about the declining life expectancy in this country. And I think the Democrats have gotten a pass recently because of the terrible mishandling of Donald Trump.
Yes, there's plenty of blame to go around, and Donald Trump is on everybody's mind because he dismantled the a committee that was supposed to help with preparation. So it wouldn't have been like a silver bullet, but it would have been something. So that's kind of foremost on people's minds. But you're absolutely right. There's been a whole infrastructure of public health and healthcare that has been privatized, that has been commodified, that has been undermined. Small hospitals all over the country have been shut down. Barack Obama, had promised that there would be a public option, and then he promptly went on to basically nix it and to kill the movement for single payer, and to substitute for that what was basically a Republican idea that, Romney Care essentially was transformed into Obamacare, which doesn't meet our needs, by any stretch of the imagination. It's half of Americans right now who are either uninsured or underinsured. And that was even before the pandemic hit. So yeah, you can't take on a pandemic unless you have a public health infrastructure and you have a healthcare system. And this is part of the bipartisan surrender to the forces of war in Wall Street. And their number one client is the health insurers, or one of their major clients, and the pharmaceutical industry, who are both making out like bandits. So this is a bipartisan problem, and again, it underscores that we need more political choices here, and we're very close to breaking through to have those political choices. And so I just want to underscore again that we may win a big opening on political choices through ranked choice voting. So if you know anybody who hasn't voted yet, please help get the word out to support ranked choice voting. And just as a little piece of good news, we know that there are many states right now that are going to be following in Massachusetts' footsteps. Whether it passes or not, this is out of the bag as a really great thing. And so it's going to be moving forward nationally.
We have it up in Maine.
Yes, indeed. And people are really thrilled with it there and keep bringing it back every time the duopoly tries to kill it.
A couple of people calling in from Maine. Of course, we have upstate New York, and we have Leonard Lerman and Magpie, and from all over the place. I want to mention two more news outlets that we recommend highly. One is called Mint Press News. It's Munar Muhawesh. I hope I said her name right. The other is, of course, Black Agenda Report. Check out those, as well as all the other ones that Jill suggested. The Gray Zone Consortium News. There's a lot. It doesn't have the power of some of the mainstream news, but Jill, thank you so much for being with us. It's just great to hear from you again. Let's everybody say thank you to Jill like this. And Magpie, are you still with us? Or Magpie, let's see. Magpie might have checked out.
Oh, we're still here.
You're still here. Magpie, will you take us out with some lovely, like Ain't Gonna Study No War No More, or Oh Freedom, or something like that, and we can all sing ourselves out.
We thought we would sing Give Light, because that's something that...
Give Light, oh yeah.
Yeah. Ella Baker inspired this song, and
right.
Give light like that in sign language. You can give it from someplace else. You can also give it to yourself. And sometimes we just need the light to know where to go. So you can help me with sign language if you like. It's very easy to sing along. It goes like this.
Give light, and people will find the way. Give light, and people will find the way. Give a light, and then people will find the way. People will find the way. I do believe.
Try it with us. Here we go. Ready?
Give a light, and people will find the way. Give a light, and people will find the way. Give light, and people will find the way. People will find a way. I do believe.
Stand together.
Stand together, and people will find the way. Stand together, and people will find the way. Stand together, and people will find the way. People will find the way. I do believe.
Sing together.
Sing together, and people will find the way. Sing will find the way. People will find the way, I do believe. People will find the way, I do believe.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
you,
you.
Magpie. Thank you, Jill Stein.
Thank you, Dean Stevens. Thank you, Community Church. Thank you, Magpie.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of the
And
day.
if you haven't voted yet, get your butt in the booth. That's what I say.
Vote early and often.
And I declare the meeting at the building is over. Take care, everybody.